Streaming on Facebook and we are streaming on YouTube. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. I will be starting up the music and we'll let everybody in. All right, here we go. Hey, good evening, everybody, and welcome to our Greatest Generation Live Masters of the Air live stream. I'm Todd DiPastino. I am the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club, and I've been the director of the Veterans Breakfast Club for 16 years, since 2008, and we thank you for joining us here at our Veterans Breakfast Club event. We've been creating these communities of listening around veterans and their stories since 2008. And the programs that we share connect, heal, educate, and inspire. And they're only possible because of your generous support. You could donate to the Veterans Breakfast Club and become a member by visiting us at veteransbreakfastclub.org. We're grateful for sponsors. Tobacco-free Adagio Health is sponsoring this event. We'll say a little bit more about them in 1 hour. And also UPMC for Life has been underwriting our programs. We're very grateful for their support. So I want to let everybody know that we have some events coming up. 1 week from tonight, you know that we have what we used to call our VBC happy hour every Monday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. And next week, Monday, April 22nd, we are doing it again. It's been a while since we've done this. This is going to be an open free-for-all. Oh my gosh, it's going to be freaking weird. We're doing our VBC Jeopardy. Last time we did it, man, it was great. We had teams. This time we're just going to you're just going to raise your hand like they do on the show. You're going to have to click and raise your hand, and then you'll get a shot at the answer. We are working on the questions as we speak. Ray Brendel, also one of our Vietnam era veterans, came up with a whole Jeopardy game that we'll be playing. So we're going to do 2 rounds of Jeopardy. That's on Monday, April 22nd. And then on Wednesday, April 24th, we have a live in-person event at Christ Church at Grove Farm. That's in the Pittsburgh area, the Sewickley, Pennsylvania. If you are in our area, Western PA, we'd love to have you. It's always fascinating. I already know that we're going to have 2 World War II veterans, one D-Day veteran who landed on Utah Beach, Warren Goss, he will be there. And we'll also have Guy Prestia, who turns 102 on April 27th. And he was in the 45th Infantry Division, 511 days in combat, seems to remember every single one, and he always has something interesting to share. So do join us if you can, Wednesday, April 24th. That's in Sewickley, PA at Christ Church at Grove Farm. Would love to have you join us. But tonight we have a really special program. We're very grateful for creator and writer of Masters of the Air, John Orloff, to spend some time with us, telling us about his work in creating that wonderful series that we all got to enjoy. I have a poll that I'm going to share, and so be ready for that. I'm going to share it, put it up shortly, and but right now I want to throw it to Glenn. Glenn, how are you?
I'm excellent, just great. 70 degrees, sunny in Pittsburgh, 7 o'clock. Can't get better, right? The tough part is people are going to have to start making a choice between listening to us or sitting out on their back patio with a glass of wine. And I'm afraid if we don't have John Orloff on every week, we may lose.
I got to tell you, if John wasn't on, I'd be on my back porch drinking wine.
There you go. Same with me. John, we want to welcome John Orloff. John, thank you so very. Oh, audio for John. Todd?
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
There you are. Thank you, John. Yeah, welcome, John Orloff, to Veterans Breakfast Club, Greatest Generation Live, Masters of the Air. So we're very, very pleased to have John on. He obviously, everybody knows he is the developer. We're going to talk about some of these words that are thrown around, John, but the script writer for Masters of the Air, also worked on Band of Brothers. So we're very, very honored. Thank you, John.
Well, thanks. It's fun to be here.
Just give me a moment. I always like to recognize any World War II veterans, and I see them. I see John Luckadoo. Hello, Lucky. How are you today? You could just, nope, we can't hear him, Todd. We'll unmute you, Lucky. Todd, are you trying to unmute Lucky? Yeah. Hold on, Lucky.
Hey, Lucky, I asked you to unmute. Could you click the unmute so we could hear you? Dang it.
Yeah.
John Luckadoo is one of those people where I hang on every word he says.
Still no good.
Yeah.
Bottom left corner, right? Is that where it is? Yeah.
Let me unmute.
There we
There
go.
we go.
Hallelujah.
Hi, John.
Hey, Lucky, how are you? Great to see you.
Well, I'm great, and I'm just so delighted to see that you're up and around and doing well.
Yes, my ankle I'm off the crutches. I broke my ankle about, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, and pretty badly, like in 3 places, and surgery, whatever. So I missed seeing Lucky at an event last month, which was a real bummer. So yes, I am mobile. Thank you, Lucky.
Well, I'm just delighted to know that, John, and wish you a very speedy recovery from here on in.
Great, thank you.
I'm
Thank
sorry
you.
I can't stay with you, but I do have another engagement, so I'm going to have to sign off. But I couldn't miss the opportunity to say hi to you and wish you well.
Well, the pleasure is mine. Thank you, sir. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night.
Thanks,
Okay.
Lucky. Thanks so very much.
You're welcome.
Do we see any other World War II veterans on with us tonight? Joe Peterburs, perhaps? I didn't see him as I scrolled through. I know Ed Cottrell is traveling. Ed Cottrell at 102 travels more than I do. Almost every week, he always emails me. He says, Glenn, I'll be on or I'll not be on. The last couple of weeks, it's Glenn, I can't be on. I'm traveling here, or there. Ed, did you forget you're 102? He's amazing. I don't think we have some of the other World War II veterans we often have on. I do want to recognize some of our great contributors that are on. I see Marilyn Walton. Marilyn, hello.
Oh, hey, Marilyn. Where are you, Marilyn? I don't see you yet, but that's because I'm not very good at
Unmute
this
yourself,
stuff.
Marilyn.
Unmute, Marilyn.
Where is she? Oh, there she is. I see you now. Hi. Can't hear you, though.
We're having
Do
trouble
it
with that
again.
unmute
Try it
button.
again. Try it again, Marilyn. Marilyn will work on it. We have Colin
We'll come
Heaton.
back.
We have Robert Matson.
Colin Heaton. Say hello, Colin. How about Colin?
Hello, all.
There we are. Welcome, Colin. We missed you last week.
I had a storm and lost part of a roof, so
Oh, no.
had some issues to fix. But no, it's good to see Mr. Orloff because I've never met him, although I was privileged to be invited to work on the show. But it's good to see you, sir.
Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. You can call me John.
Oh, thank you, John.
And
You
then
bet.
you mentioned Robert Matson is on as well. Okay, Robert.
Hello.
There he is.
Good to be here.
Good to see you, Robert.
Oh, by the way, this is for Mr. Orloff.
Curry.
I was a proud I was a proud member of the 101st myself. So.
Were you really?
Yeah, I was a 502nd.
Wow. When, if I may ask?
85 to 86.
Great.
Robert.
Special place in my heart, obviously.
John, I don't know if you've read Robert's book, but we've had Robert on a couple of times.
I have not.
Pennsylvania guy. He wrote a book on Jimmy Stewart.
Oh, yeah, I know of the book. Yes, I have not read the book. I stayed pretty tight on the B-17 groups.
One of those
Good
B-24 guys.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Stewart's from southwestern Pennsylvania, a town called
Yep.
Indiana, PA. There's a museum up there, so he's
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
our
yeah, yeah, yeah.
local heroes.
I know the story, obviously, but have not read the book.
So let's get started. If I missed anybody, I apologize.
Marilyn is unmuted if you want
Oh,
Marilyn to
I'm
say hello.
unmuted.
Oh,
Yeah.
hey, Marilyn.
Hi again. Here I am. And
Now I can hear
Carolyn
your
Miller's
voice.
down there. General Clark's daughter's right there. Carolyn Miller. I see her. There's Carolyn.
Oh,
Marilyn
yes,
Miller, yeah.
Carolyn.
We
I'm
had-
happy to be here.
There
Thank
you
you.
are. We had Carolyn on last week with also Pam Whitelock about their father's story. Well, Carolyn's father's story, obviously General Clark, and Pam's story about her uncle, Sconiers, Ewart Sconiers.
And Brad, do you have Carolyn Father's book?
Yeah, I wanted to tell everybody, you know, I just finished it today. It's a fascinating book. And when I opened it up, I saw that it was signed by the author, which was very, very moving to me. But what was even more surprising to me was when I went forward and saw this, it was this book was signed by the author and dedicated to Dave Jones, the Doolittle Raider, that
wow.
was in Stalag with him. And this was like a treasure to me. I just got it at a used bookstore and it showed up and I opened it up, but I didn't realize the relevance of the inscription until I got into the book and said, holy smokes, I have a treasure here.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, you do. And my father and Davy Jones were very good friends for Davy's entire life. He passed away before my dad did, but they were very close friends.
Well, this book, Carolyn, is yours. If you'd like it, I'll mail it to you and you can have it. It's
Oh my goodness, I have several copies, and if it's a treasure for you, I would really love to have you keep it.
Well, there's somebody else in the audience who I know will treasure this just as much as me, and I'll surprise them with it. It's a great book. I mean, it tells so much more about the POW experience. After last week, I was just intrigued. I said, I've got to get that book, and I couldn't put it down. It's just a great, great book. Thank you so much.
Well, as long as I've got the floor, I have to say that I'm hoping very much that Mr. Orloff might consider another set of episodes on the POW experience. There was so much more than was in Masters of the Air. Fascinating stuff, some of the coding and the secret
You
stuff
don't
that went
trust
on.
me. I know. I read 30 books. I talk to Marilyn constantly. These things are not entirely up to me.
I recognize that. But there's also the Vietnam veterans, and they're the POWs in Vietnam. So, and the ones in Japan. So there's a lot there.
John, we've got enough work for you for another 50 years.
Yeah, yeah. Isn't that the truth?
Get you to do Robert Matson's book into a series. Sure, that would be neat. I'd love that. So
I got to tell you, I'm taking a little break from war right now, from real war. It's actually quite difficult to, I mean, anybody who writes about these things, to spend your entire day writing about real people dying. There is a point where that it was very hard. You know, I mean, one of the things that I'm really proud about in Masters is almost all the time. There are some exceptions, but almost the entire time when you see when you see a plane go down in Masters of the Air, that's a real plane that just went down. That you know, when Hummel's fort goes down in episode 3, I mean, the 3 forts that go down in episode 1, Schmallenbach, Adams, and Petrick, those are real forts that went down on that mission. You know, it's not just random to me. You know, there was a point in the scripts, actually, which evolved quite a bit over time, as Marilyn could attest, there was a time where Schmallenbach, Adams, and Petrick were like the main characters of episode 1, where we really got to know them, and then it wasn't that way. But my point being that I had to write about these guys dying over and over and over and over, and in episode 3, Biddick going down, and it's not just Biddick's down. Every plane that goes down in Regensburg, that's a real plane that went down, and I know the crews. And it wasn't just me who did. So did the director. So did the special effects crews. There's all these behind the scenes shots of the sort of stick figure version of the special effects, the early versions of the special effects, where all the planes are color coded because they're not detailed yet. They're just kind of like stick figures in formation, and they're all color coded, every single plane, because we are tracking every single plane, and we know, well, that's our baby. That one that's pink is, Rosie's Riveters. Name your plane. So, that's a hard place to live, just
Sure.
writing about people dying all the time. And so I need a little break from not just World War II, but I think real story combat, because I've been working on Masters of the Air. Masters was a lot more complicated to get made and to make than either the Pacific or Band, for a whole bunch of reasons. Complicated, but I spent 10 years, working on this thing, and I need a little break from it.
When you say 10 years, are you saying 10 years in total, off and on, you're working on other things, for a few months?
10 years in total, with the caveat that it was mostly full-time on Masters of the Air, at least 7 of those years. Because it was, I wrote 400 different script drafts.
400.
Correct.
I saw you on another interview hold up this first script, or a script.
No, what it is, it's right here. It's
there it is.
This is called a Bible, and this is actually when I first met Marilyn, actually, and Lucky, and it's dated, it's finished on February 23rd, 2015. But what it was, as I'm sure you're, as you guys all who have read Masters of the Air, the book, Don's excellent book, it is unlike Band of Brothers, which is a book by Stephen Ambrose that follows very specifically Easy Company, from the 506th, and a very select group of men from the whole book, from beginning to middle to end. That is not Masters of the Air. Masters of the Air is not about the 100th Bomber Group. The 100th Bomber Group is in Masters of the Air, and so there was not enough material in the book to make a mini series. So that meant that, like, my first year, and this was full time, was writing this document, which was sort of an outline of basically what the show was originally going to be 10 years ago, and a little bit more. Sort of like episode 1 was going to be this, and then I would go through the episode for about 10 pages and footnote it heavily with sources. I think in the end, I don't know, 60, 70 sources that I used, above and beyond Masters of the Air, the book. Marilyn was a fountain of many of those sources. And when it came to the POW stuff. So, that was my first year, I don't know where anyway, whatever. Next question. I don't know where, I can't remember what the question was. So
I'll start this, then we'll start pulling in other questions, but let's just take that. So I'd like to understand how that script developed. So you wrote that, and then
So,
what
yeah.
happened? I have this image of you, Hank Spielberg, and two or three of these other
It's
big names.
pretty close to that in the
People with
early
the
days.
bottle of whiskey, saying just
Not that,
do that.
unfortunately.
Cigars. Then let's do
No,
this.
no, not even that. It was pretty
Fun.
professional meeting room, a couple lunches, conference rooms. So yeah, so I wrote this. And then the next step was Tom and Stephen read it. And in how these shows work, Tom sort of is the point person on the scripts, on both Band the Pacific and Masters. So I wrote the first couple of, well, no, first Tom and I spent a week with Tom and one other guy and me going through this document page by page. And Tom saying, no, I don't want to do that. Let's just cut that out of the document, or give me some more ideas, or is there a cool way that we can show this? And so I integrated those notes and sort of areas where we would focus or not focus. Because this isn't a script, right? It's more information than you need, rather than this is the dramatic story. No, it's more like, okay, this is what our four main characters were doing in this time period that is going to be this episode, right? So, so much more that happened in June of 1943 is in this document than is in the final show, right? Just like, as Marilyn can tell you, I took some deep dives in the POW experience, and for whatever reasons, 15% of it is in the show, and again, these are not all my calls, what ends up in the show. So that's the first process, was Tom going through this with just me. Then I go back to my house or my office, and I have a cat on my desk, so occasionally I'm giving him a little lovey.
We have lots of it sometimes.
Then I wrote the first script and second script and third script, and then sat down with Tom again, and go through the scripts and what's working, what's not working. And again, overwriting. Those first scripts were 80, 90 pages. Now, to give you a sense of what that means, is that's a feature. That's a movie. It's roughly a minute a page, when you look at a script. So me turning in a 90-page script to Tom Hanks is overkill, because the finished episodes are going to be 45 pages, right? Because it's roughly 45, 50 minutes an episode. So then we start talking about what we're going to cut from those 90 pages. So that was the first process. And then there was sort of a second writing process when Apple got involved and just were going to become the people that funded this thing.
Money talks.
Money talks, and they have opinions, as they have every right to, since they are literally the people writing all of the checks. And so that's sort of a second round of kind of creative thinking and making changes creatively, which I'm still being a part of. But now it's not just me and Tom having conversations. Now it's me and Tom and other people, larger groups having conversations, including the directors, very importantly. And then we shoot it, and then there's a third sort of round of writing, which is the editing. And then other things really change and are not in the show, or we realize we need to add something to the show. So that's sort of the general process.
Sounds a lot harder than writing a book.
Yes, it is.
Several authors. on the program, and I've heard many authors, some relatively famous ones, tell me how they go about writing a book. And at the end of the day, it's pretty much them, maybe with the
Yeah.
public comments and an editor's comments. But for you, it sounds like more a larger group of people going through several series of.
Very much. It's especially on something this large. You know, every television show and every movie, the process can be different depending upon the players involved and how they work. You know, this is just how this show happened. You know, I mean, so this was a little bit more complicated. Then, you know, we had COVID got involved, and it was a very, and then it was also just giant. It was a giant shoot. And yeah, just very complicated to get it going. See, my cat just turned off my Zoom. Stop it. Not turned it off, but like swiped the screen because he saw my trackpad. I'm back.
I'm gonna go get my dachshund. We'll have a little fun. Let me ask this question, and then I'm going to open it up to.
Well, let me just add one thing. I guess it's very different than writing a book because it's like I have a room full of editors, not one. You know, I have, and they change over time. Like my first editor was Tom Hanks, and then, you know, my last editor is Steven Spielberg, and there's a lot, which is, I mean, just that's not literally true, but there's a lot of people that have to feel comfortable with what's going on.
I hope this doesn't become an advertisement to young people to become script writers, because it doesn't sound all that pleasing.
It is a difficult. No, it is not. It is not like it looks like in the movies. You know, it's a job.
Oh, your interpersonal skills must be exceptional.
Well, it's interesting. My father, I come from a show business family, which is why I don't live in Los Angeles anymore, because I kind of ran away from that. But my great grandparents, and I think pretty much you'll all know who Fibber McGee and Molly were. So those are my great grandparents, and they were a radio team. And then my parents. My grandparents were in the business, and then my father was a commercial director, and that's basically advertising, and it's very much about communication. You know, it's about serving a client. Like if Coca-Cola is your client, you know, that's your client. You're less a filmmaker than, and so when I started in the film business, I actually started in advertising, and so. I learned, yes, communication is a really good, and looking at the people who have hired you to write as you're a client, you know, because that's really what Tom was. This wasn't my idea, you know, this isn't, I mean, it became my baby. Obviously, it's 10 years of my life, but it's not an original idea of mine. And I'm not sitting in a room like a writer, you know, I am a writer for hire.
Fascinating. So I'll ask one more question, then we'll open it up to the
Sure.
field. And it's the question we got into a little bit with Todd before the program started in the green room. So we're all fans of the trilogy, Band, Pacific, Masters now. But Band, you still had many of the veterans, most of the veterans still alive. Dick Winters still alive, who was obviously the principal character, and many of the others. But for Masters of the Air, none of the principal characters were alive, right?
Yeah.
So how, and you wrote the script for one or two of the
episode 2, the Day of Days, and then episode 9, Why We Fight, when they discovered the concentration camp.
Right. So my question is, knowing Dick Winters and knowing the veterans who were alive then, how was it different in Masters of the Air versus Band, where in Masters of the Air, none of the main veterans?
Yeah, it was a totally different experience for everybody. It was one of the big differences in making the show, and the process of making the show was significantly different, because you couldn't just call them up like we could with Winters. You know, I could call Dick anytime and say, hey, well, what did you feel when this happened? What is the true story about this? And It took a while to earn Dick's trust, and once you had Dick's trust, you had the rest of the men's trust. I didn't meet Dick because he never went to the reunions. I didn't meet him at the reunions. I mean, so I first met the other guys, Lipton, Malarkey, Compton, at a reunion in Denver, I think in 1997 or 8, and got to know those guys really, really well. And that made it a lot easier, quite frankly. By the time we were making Masters, there were at least like interviews with Rosie that had been uploaded to YouTube, and same with Crosby. None of Buck or Bucky, Egan or Clevin. Because they both died. Well, Clevin, there was an interview, but it's really hard to hear and understand. Nothing on Bucky. And that was a big challenge. That's what it required, a ton more research. Masters did than either of the other two shows. I mean, just a ton more research.
Any chance that research will turn into a book of some kind?
I don't own it. That's the other thing. When you are a screenwriter, the studio owns your copyright. So that Bible I showed you, I don't own. That's owned by Apple. So I can't really. I don't think they're ever gonna. That's not like what they do.
Yeah, not their
no,
thing to do. Yeah.
No.
Well,
No.
let me stop here, Todd. Is there anything in the chat room, or are there questions that other people would like to pose rather than just me?
Carol Popjock has a wonderful question. I'm going to ask her to unmute and ask it, Carol. And then we have, I think, Bob Flage here has his hand raised. I'm going to go with Carol first.
Sorry, I'm just fixing my.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. What an honor to speak to you, Mr. Orloff. I've seen all three of, I've seen the whole trilogy. Have a particular interest in Masters of the Air. My late husband was a writer, and I know how upset he was when he got all the editors' comments. So obviously you had to leave some of your precious scenes, characters, whatever, on a cutting room floor of sorts. Which is the one? Does one come to mind that you really wanted to get it in and it just couldn't make it?
It's so that is such a long list. I mean, truly.
I'm sorry to hear that.
No, well, it was such a big story. I mean, it deserves 30 hours and still just focusing on those 4 people. You know what I mean? Like,
yes.
I would have loved to have gone way deeper in Stalag Luft 3. I would have, I mean, there's just tons, or going into other characters, Cowboy Roan or Lucky, or but particularly there are a few. I know, for example, Murphy, Chloe Molasses, Frank Murphy was a bigger character, Chloe's grandfather in earlier versions of the show. That was one that I was a little bummed didn't quite make it in terms of just full storylines. I wish we had more time to explore the POW experience. That is a bummer to me. But there's only so much we can do with the budget we have and in the time frame that we have. I would have liked to explore the villages near the base a little bit more. Sammy, one of the kids, he wrote a really interesting book, and there's really interesting interactions that happened, around Dis, which is the town near Thorpe Abbotts, and I would have liked to get into that a little bit more. I mean, it's endless.
Bob Flage, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. With this massive undertaking, what interests me is the staff, or the cast. How was that formulated? I mean,
How the cast was?
Yes.
So
what I'm saying is, who was involved with the development
Yeah.
of the cast, and how long did it take? And were they obviously, as the episodes were written, you had to bring new people in, but
Yeah, well, the episodes were written ahead of the shoot. So I wrote the first 7 episodes uh, before Apple ever said they wanted to make the show, right? So we had originally it was going to be 10 episodes, just like the other shows. And so we had almost all 10 of them written before we ever started, rolling cameras. Obviously things change, in the process of once you start rolling cameras. So the casting sort of started with the first 4 characters, Buck, Bucky, Egan, Clevin. I always say Buck and Bucky, but I should be saying Egan, Clevin, Rosenthal, and Crosby. So those were the first people cast. We hire a person whose exact job is called casting director. And these are the kind of people who, go and see all the theater that, I necessarily don't want to, and other, all the little plays that are going on, in this case in London, because we knew we were going to make the show in Great Britain. At the same, so her, there's a whole like career, doing exactly that. So she goes off and does that. And meanwhile, Tom Hanks, makes a movie with Austin Butler, called Elvis. And he says, wow, this kid is amazing. Maybe he should play Clevin. And, once Tom Hanks sort of says that's a good actor, you kind of listen, especially after Band. You have to remember also Band, like Band of Brothers has one of the greatest casts ever in television, in my opinion.
Almost all unknowns at that time.
At that time, and they all became huge stars. And similarly here, we just had great casting directors.
So once you know who is cast, take Austin Butler or any of the others, once you know that person is cast, does that impact your script writing then?
No, not at all.
Not at all. Okay.
No.
Yeah.
No, especially on these projects, like maybe on a movie that's, a fantasy movie. Yeah, maybe. But, at least from my perspective on this show, first and foremost, it's always what really happened, and there are some, disagreements that were had on the show about, that, and which parts do we show? And, but no, the script doesn't really change. I mean, maybe Austin got a little, no, I mean, the show is about Clevin and Egan,
Robert Mattson.
Yeah.
All right. So you talked about 400 drafts on a room full of opinions, like
Yeah.
probably an endlessly revolving room full of opinions.
Yeah.
So the Tuskegee Airmen show up so late. What was the dynamics of how it came to be that way?
Hey, Todd, could you share the screen with me? Because I have some pics of that. I can't share the screen, Todd.
Part of it has to do with the timing of the logistics of the show and the time period when the show takes place. Meaning, the Tuskegee guys don't arrive even in Africa and Italy well, I guess they are in 43, right? But they're not doing any well, let me backtrack. We started with this idea of Stalag Luft 3. And because Stalag Luft 3 had Tuskegee Airmen in it, we found that really, really interesting. And we equally felt like, oh, here's a really organic way to show the Black experience, the African-American experience in World War II that we couldn't do in Band of Brothers and you couldn't do in the Pacific, just by the nature of the segregation of the armies. And here was a way to organically bring that in to our show. And it was always a question of how are we going to introduce these characters, and there were lots of different versions that were discussed about in these drafts, and it was always backtracking from, well, August, I want to say 8th. I can't remember when Macon and Jefferson show up at Stallaglyph 3, but it's around August, first couple of weeks of August of 44. And so that doesn't happen in our show until episode 8. That's just when that date hits Masters of the Air, because as you probably know, the first 6 episodes take place in 3 months. June, July, August, I'm sorry, 5. So they arrive in June of 43. Trondheim is June 23rd or 24th of 43. And then Bremen and Munster, when Cleven and Egan go down, is October 8th and 10th of 43. So we spend, and then episode 6. So that's the first 5 episodes, or 4 months, right? And then episode 6 is just a few days later. It's the next week, basically, or the next 2 weeks, because it's Egan on the run, getting to the Stalag, intercut with Crosby in Oxford, which is kind of moved that from. Oh, my camera. Can you still hear me? My camera seems to have frozen. I don't know why.
We're good.
Let me there we go. Okay. And so that was kind of locked. That was baked into what the show was going to be, just structurally, because those were our main characters, right? And so then episode 7, just again, by definition, becomes about, Black Week, Bloody Monday, re-upping, the upping of the minimum missions, and Rosie re-upping. Like that's a lot to do in a full episode, I agree. But again, I don't have 30 episodes. I have 10, right? So that takes us up to basically May, the end of May of 43. And so this is really the first opportunity we could, have to show the Tuskegee guys, unless we wanted to introduce them even earlier, having no relationship at all to the 100th Bomber Group. Right. And so that was, I know it's controversial. I'm not, I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know how we could have done it differently. It was the way the show kind of ended up structuring out. And then there were conversations about, well, do we see them in combat? Do we see them in combat in flashback? If we don't meet them until they show up at the Stalag, right? Then we don't get to see them in combat, and then we don't really ever get to see the fighters in combat, because so it was the only way we could see a P-51 in combat. And so then there was a whole conversation of like, okay, well, let's make this episode the way it is. So that was the process there.
Great, thank you.
Fascinating. And anyone else?
Oh, yes. Let's see. We have
I can just sit back and listen now. Okay.
it's yeah. A lot of great questions. I'm going to go to Jermaine. Hello, Jermaine.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Good to meet you. You pretty much answered it, but I just wondered, how are the number of episodes chosen? I assume it's timing or time in dollars, and
yeah, that's exactly it. I mean, it episode 9 was originally 2 episodes, and as we were finishing the show, we had some real budget issues. I mean, I won't lie. COVID. We shot for 10 months during the thickest part of COVID, and that really that cost us money. And that money came from somewhere, and where it came from really was episode 10. and so episode 9 is sort of like an episode and a half, maybe, or an episode and a third. While Apple was phenomenal with the budget and we had the best people in the world, I would argue, working on this show, it wasn't like we were pissing money away. Not, you know what I mean? And there is a certain point where you go, wow, okay, we can only do 9 episodes. So now my role is to figure out what's the best version of 9 episodes.
We have a question. William and Carol Wagner asked, was there any scene or any part of the script that you really had to fight to keep in, that you were wedded to, and who has the final say?
Again, so much, it's been such a long process, and who has the final say? Ultimately it was Gary Getzman, who's one of the executive producers. There was no one person, Tom, Stephen, Gary, who are the executive producers. Gary Getzman is Tom Hanks's business partner. The company that Tom Hanks owns, he owns with Gary Getzman, called Playtone. And they make all their movies as partners. Gary is the producer. Anyway, and then obviously Stephen, and then obviously the big guys at Apple. There's no one person who's making every decision on this kind of show. What happens is a decision is made and everybody likes it until maybe Stephen sees it and says, maybe we should change that little thing. And then, well, Steven Spielberg, we're going to change that little thing, but most televisions have like that one showrunner, they're called, who does have that final say. And in here, I think it was mostly Gary Getzman, would be my answer. And then maybe Tom or Steven would either agree with that decision, or we would hear that he didn't, and we'd go from there.
Right. Bob von Bargen, you are a member of the Order of Magellan. And I love your comment here. You made this to me in an email. I'd love you to ask John Orloff.
Well, the question I asked is the former Air Force navigator. The Air Force is a pilot's game. And I never in all my life ever thought that I would live long enough to see a navigator as a primary character in one of these military movies. Having been, in situations where you would see things happen and you had to exercise leadership and you had no authority, and you'd come back in and the pilot would get all the praise, and the rest of us all went off and had a beer. It's that type of thing.
Yeah.
My question is, how did this mistake happen?
I'm very, very proud of that mistake, Bob, if I may call you that.
I had people calling me say, Bob, you've got to watch this program. Look at what's happening. It's a miracle.
That was one of my earliest, biggest decisions and ideas, because it comes from a dramatic problem, actually. And the dramatic problem was Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg wanted to make a television show about Egan and Clevin and Robert Rosenthal, and they only overlap in the unit for about 4 weeks. Right. And so, Egan and Clevin are shot down, as I said, in October of 43. Rosie arrives in September of 43, but obviously serves until VE Day. And so they wanted to tell the story of the 100th through those guys, but those guys don't know each other. So when I started writing this Bible, I read a lot of books. I mean, a lot of books, 20, 30, 40 books. And one of the books I read was Harry Crosby's memoir. And I loved the book. Harry is such a wonderful writer. And I quickly understood, wait a minute, Harry Crosby is the only flight officer who arrived in June, actually it was late May of 1943, and was still there at VE Day. Only guy. Everybody else either finished their tour of duty, was a casualty. There were a couple people who left home, went home early for whatever reasons. But he's the only guy who was there the whole time. And he was also a really good friend of Rosie's. They bunked together for a while. They really were really tight. And I thought, well, and he knew the first generation. I call them sort of the two generations of the 100th. That first generation of flyboys that signed up before Pearl Harbor because they were in love with the romance of flying, right? That's Buck and Bucky, scarf wielding, tough guys. And then the second generation is Rosie's generation, the guys that became signed up, volunteered because of Pearl Harbor, and had a whole different mindset. And Crosby was the guy who unified these two eras for me of the 100th. And then the bonus was exactly what you just said, which is we've never really explored the importance of navigation in any of these movies. And this idea that what navigation was in 1943 without a computer, without, I don't have to tell you all the things that aren't there in 1943. I think hopefully all of us watching this show knows that. And how it was you had to really know what the F you were doing in that position. Yeah, I have one too. Mine's a prop, but
that's the computer.
Well, wait a minute. I'm not going to let you think that you're the only one. Here's mine.
And Scott, I want you, Todd, I want you to know that every night I go and I plug it in.
But as soon as I pitched it to Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg and said, okay, I think we should have a fourth character, a main character, and I wanted to be a navigator, and they both were like, oh, we've never seen that before, that's great. And so that was the sort of it sort of came from a not a romantic place, but from a need in storytelling.
And John, if I can intervene there, so is that the reason his voice is the voice of the narrator?
Yes. Yeah.
And I want you to know that in the last episode, I had a big smile on my face because the navigator was a lieutenant colonel and the other guys were all majors and captains.
Yeah. And it's true. It's true. It was true. The other guys got shot down and were POWs, and Crosby just kept on getting promoted. Yeah, you bet.
Oh, by the way, I'd like to let you know that I have one of those too. and guess who gave this to me?
I don't know.
Curtis LeMay, 1986.
Oh my God,
that's pretty amazing.
That is.
Well, he developed navigation for the Air Force. Curtis LeMay was an amazing guy.
Yeah. No, I know.
And I'm really glad you worked his name at least into the script.
He was a character at one point. He was on camera again. Imagine how like I said, each script was 90 pages originally, and LeMay was cut out like as a character. I mean, he was in. I think like what mission did he fly?
He flew Schweinfurt Regensburg.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we had him on that originally, and we had, I don't know if the famous 100th lore is, Clevin drove by in a Jeep and got mud all over LeMay's pants, and that was in it at one point in the show, but sadly that's one of the things that was cut. I guess that I would add that to the list of the earlier question of things I wish were still in the show was Curtis LeMay. And in fact, and also Tom Jeffries, the last important commanding officer for the group was Colonel Jeff, and he was, by all accounts, an amazing. I mean, obviously, there's so many amazing men. We couldn't. I mean, he was in scripts, and there was a little bit more detail about the COs in the original drafts, including Bennett, who's another remarkable man who's in episode 7 and leads the group after Black Monday, and when he did not have to, and he is a temporary commanding officer. And on Black Monday they lose 15 ships, and on Wednesday he's leading that group. 2 days later, and as you guys know, the commanding officer doesn't have to, and he was a great man, and we didn't really get time to. There's a version where that episode 7, there is a draft of that script where the script's mostly about Bennett, and it just, we couldn't shoot that version.
I threw this picture up here because it kind of gets to this same theme as, you focused on a navigator.
Yep.
I was very pleased to see the ground crew at least addressed. I mean, my father was a mechanic. I have a picture of my father, and he was 17, who looked just like this. Now, he didn't make it to the war. He was too young.
Right.
But, it just appreciated seeing the enlisted man's point of view and the ground crew's.
Well, this goes to the broader point of, having authors on with us today. The reason he's in the show is because he wrote a book.
Yeah.
Ken Lemons wrote self-published little thing that Don Miller read, and Don Miller put in Masters of the Air, the sequence, I think it must be, the sequence where Lemons goes into the wheel well and fixes the carburetor, which really happened. It didn't happen on the mission we show. It happened actually on the Berlin mission, Black Monday it happened. And so I read that in Masters of the Air, that little bit about Ken. And then I called up Don. I was like, where did you get, I need the source. Where's the book? And he didn't have it. He only had Xerox copies of like 2 chapters. And I found the book because there's only a few hundred copies that were published. But because that little book was published, and I then read the whole book, and it's very small, 100 pages maybe, but it's just great anecdote after great anecdote after great anecdote. And he's a wonderful man. And he was so emblematic of the generation of farm boys. One of the things that I wish I could have gotten more into the show is the reason he could, at 18 and 19, be the chief mechanic for 4 B-17s, I can't remember what it was because he lived on a farm all of his life, and he knew how to fix a fucking tractor, and that was America. And so he knew how to fix the family Ford Model T, and that's just what you did. And so when the war started, and so that was a great story that, again, I could have done more on Lemons in a heartbeat, and his relationship with the kids, and living really, those guys lived, as you guys know, again, I'm telling you stuff you already know. They didn't live in their Nissan huts. They didn't have time to live in their Nissan huts. They were living in shitty tents with stovepipe heating because they had to be on the hard stand 22 hours a day, Yeah.
A lot, and people forget, for every one flyer or every 10 flyers in one plane, there were 30 guys.
30 guys. Exactly.
Other people, Todd?
Well, I think it's time for a station break.
Okay.
I just want to let people know this is the
time here.
Excuse me?
I lose track of time.
Yes, you do. This is Veterans
There's my cat, everybody.
I missed your cat. This is the Veterans Breakfast Club, and I'm Todd DiPastino, Executive Director, and we do this every Thursday night, every Monday night. I love that cat. Orange cats are the best. I want to thank Tobacco Free Adagio Health for sponsoring this program. They've been sponsoring us for several years now. Tobacco Free Adagio Health is dedicated to preventing and reducing tobacco use, educating people about the hazards of tobacco, and advocating for healthier places to live, work, and play. You can find out more at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. And they have a wonderful quit line if you're looking to quit tobacco. 1-800-QUIT-NOW. That's 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Helps people counsels people in helping them to quit tobacco. We also have UPMC for Life, who is sponsoring a lot of our programming this year, both in person, our magazine that comes out quarterly, and these online programs. UPMC for Life Health Plan can help you make sense of Medicare, and you can get the answers and information you need, such as how to choose the Medicare Advantage plan that's right for you. UPMC for Life has plans designed by veterans and for veterans that could save you money and get you more benefits. You could check out all your plan options at upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. That's upmchealthplan.com/Medicare. I want to let people know our magazine has been out now for our spring magazine has been out now for about a month. We send it free of charge to about 9,000 households around the country. We also hand distribute another 8,000 or so. I have boxes, a dwindling pile in my garage of boxes of these magazines. We could send out a box of 100 or a package of 50 or 25 to you if you want to distribute them to people you know who you think might be interested. These are the stories that we hear on our programs, and we write them up in magazine form and send them out. I'm a historian by trade, not a veteran, don't come from a military family, and I'm always fascinated by the stories that we hear on our programs. If you would like to receive a magazine in the mail and you're not getting it now, it's because we don't have your address. Let me know. Send me an email, Todd, T-O-D-D, @veteransbreakfastclub.org. And then finally, we have a survey after every one of our programs to see how we're doing, what you would change, what you liked about it, what you didn't like, and how we can improve. And maybe you have some suggestions about guests that we could have on sometime. I will put all the links here in the Zoom chat and also on the Facebook side so that people could take the survey and also get the magazine if they'd like. Okay, back to you, Glenn.
Okay, great. I can't believe it's already been an hour. John, you stick with us another half hour, I hope.
Sure. Let me just, I just want to show you one thing. I just found my Ken Lemon's book. And it's one of only 500 copies. But if he didn't do this book, he wouldn't be in the show.
There's another little book in Don's book, another book that I found fascinating. I wish I could find. Maybe you did. And I can't remember the man who wrote it, but a man who was in the construction battalions that built the airfields. Remember that from Don's book?
Yes.
Went into a lot of the relationships he had with the locals and.
Yep. No, I have that book too.
Yeah.
That's published, I think, by the 100th Bomber Group. At Thorpe Abbott's. Yeah.
We're going to Thorpe Abbott's this September, John.
It's great.
A group of 20 odd people. Anybody else wants to come along?
Super nice people, great place, very small. I mean, it's small town.
Yeah. So let me then take this conversation in another slightly different direction, and I'll share my screen again to start that conversation, because there were some other stars in this movie, or in this series movie, big movie, that were not people. They were, there we go. They were the sets and the planes.
Yeah.
Which was just incredible to me. I've heard a few descriptions of them. John, maybe you could help us understand the size and the scope of this.
It's really hard to appreciate the scale of this production. The best way to sort of, anybody that I know who worked on this show said it's the biggest thing they've ever seen, just in terms of the logistics and the scale of the day-to-day effort to do something like this. So what you're looking at right now is the two hard stands that we built, I think they're right next to the control tower. And then the two full-scale B-17s that we built from scratch. Neither one can fly, and only one can taxi. The other one has to be towed, is really just sort of as a background plane. And then everything else you see is digital in the show.
Not sure what I did with that one.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on there.
This
That looks like that was probably the when in episode 1 when Crosby when they belly land, I think, when they arrive in England. Or maybe it's the Scotland one. I don't know. But that's one of those two planes. And then we did a couple of things. I don't think we did a lot with the planes. This one of those replicas being hoisted around 75 feet in the air. I wasn't around when they were doing these shots. I mean, I was someplace else on location. That's the other thing. So a normal day on Masters of the Air, there are around 1,200 people working on it. And if we had a lot of extras, it would go up to about 1,500 people every day coming to work in the middle of COVID with masks, getting tested, all the logistics of that. So like a few hundred people would be doing this. Another few hundred people might be on the Thorpe Abbott set shooting a scene at the hospital. Another couple hundred people could be on the sound stage shooting a cockpit interior. But what's interesting about this plane was when they built it, they tried to build it as cheaply as possible, right? Because it doesn't have to really fly. What they quickly found out was you couldn't make these wings unless you followed Boeing's blueprints.
from the 1930s.
Yes, because
Wow.
the way the engineering of it is literally perfect to have these 75-foot wingspan wings at that angle. And I'm not an engineer. I don't know. That's all they told me. It's like, you know what? We tried to do it another way and they just would fall down. So we did it the way Boeing and it works.
The caption on this photo from wherever I took it online was, "This is them preparing for one of the takeoff scenes."
Could be. I don't know. Don't know.
Miracle of computer graphics and whatever, all those things are just miracles to me.
Yeah, to me too.
How
Well,
they-
that was, I mean, listen, as you guys also probably know, there's only a few B-17s that can fly anymore, and you certainly can't use those to make a movie because they're precious. And making a movie is a messy, dirty, elbowing job. You're going to break stuff. So that was out of the question using real B-17s. It was just never a possibility. And then secondly, the point of the show was always about the scale of the effort that was involved, which meant hundreds of B-17s, not two. There is if you notice the first mission, I don't know, there's 30 planes in the air. By the last mission in episode 9, there's 1,000.
Yes.
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 And that's intentional. That's the idea being we don't say it out loud, but that is the American industrial homeland doing a miracle of going from 200 B-17s in 1941 to building almost 13,000 of them, and then 18,000 B-24s. I mean, it still boggles the mind.
Yeah.
Don,
Jermaine, you have your, okay, Marilyn and then Jermaine.
Yeah, I'm looking at the camp and I wanted to mention that the day I got the phone call from the UK from Kirk Sadusky and John Orloff is the first time they went out to see the camp. And they were giddy when they saw it because it evidently was much larger than a lot of sets are.
Yeah.
And I wondered if he remembered that phone call because They were like two giddy kids over there trying to describe to me what the camp looked like.
It was just the scale of it again
Yeah,
was
the
just
scale.
enormous, you
Yeah.
know, the effort that was made. And listen, we didn't get everything right. It's impossible. This story is so complicated. It's so much more complicated than Band of Brothers when you're just following one unit, you know, and yeah, there's a couple of uniform changes over the course of the year of what the troopers were wearing between you know, the D-Day jump and by the end of the war, the M42 change. I can't remember
Lots
anymore.
to keep track of. Yeah.
But this show, I mean, my God, things are changing every 2 months. They got different helmets, they got different jackets, they got different oxygen systems. The camp, it was endless. So we tried so hard to get it right, and things fall through. But I was pretty happy with this set.
I was talking to Kirk about that Stalag 3 sign.
It was
And
an
asking if we
ongoing
could-
thing.
Yeah, we wanted to get that for Merrick at the museum in Poland.
Oh, did you?
Kirk said he's working on it, but he doesn't.
Good.
not
And I
good.
remember didn't
I
we have
really-
conversations about whether it was an Arabic 3 or a Roman numeral 3?
Yeah, yeah, and in the 3 that you're seeing right there is the correct one. For a long time, I
Right.
used the Roman numerals, but
Yeah, yeah.
it was actually a 3 like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that's what I think we came down to. And I was
go
like,
track
that
it
looks so
down.
weird to me. And yet again, there's an example of us being hyper accurate
Mhm.
looks odd to people.
Yeah, a lot of times what's right looks wrong in the
Mhm.
even in
Mhm.
books. But and the thing that showed up in the series that I didn't expect to see, of all the pictures I sent you, and I really thought I almost didn't send it, was the stump puller.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I was stunned when I saw the stump puller, and I don't know if you actually built the stump
Yeah.
puller.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah,
It was
yeah.
a
Oh, that
working
was
model.
built. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that was definitely
It
built.
was big in the camp, but I did not
Yeah.
expect to see it in the series, really. When it made its appearance.
Yep, yep.
It was really stunning to see that. But
Well,
yeah, the camp turned out really well.
It hit me as I was putting this up. What happens to these sets? Imagine they're torn down.
They're torn down, you know. They're not built to last though either. They are not literally paper mache, but they're built with that kind of, they're not built for lasting, you know, including the B-17s. I think those were maybe put away for later use, but again, they weren't built to exist for 20 years. You know, they are movie props. It's a different system. But I think Jermaine has a question, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I just had a question about Belle Polly's character. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly.
Yeah.
Was she based on Queen Elizabeth at all? Or
No, she is they're in the book, A Wing in the Prayer. Crosby may or may not have had an affair with this woman. He doesn't explicitly say he did in the book. I think it's pretty clear he did. Yeah, it's based on this real woman. He calls her in the book Landra Westgate, and for legal reasons we had to change it to Sandra Wingate, I think. And we don't know a lot about her because it's literally all just from Crosby's point of view, which is it's as great as Crosby's book is, he takes romantic liberties a lot in it, you know, which is fine, that people's memories change. And so we don't really know exactly what she did. We just think she worked in intelligence. And then the director of episode 8 really wanted to see her in action, just like she wanted to see the Tuskegee guys in action. So that's why we see that stuff. But so no, she's not based on Princess Elizabeth. She's based on a real spy.
I hadn't thought about that, but now that question is asked, and I think back to that character, like, wow.
She looks a little bit like her, the right age. You know, she's working for the, I can't remember what Elizabeth worked for, what her actual.
She was an ambulance driver.
Right. Yeah. No, I know, but I can't remember what it wasn't what it was called. Right. Not wax. Not. Yeah.
Other questions from anybody else before I jump in again?
Well,
Tom?
Renee Gefkin just wants to confirm. So you departed from Don Miller's book to create the script. I mean, not everything that you wrote came from the book. You were able to, incorporate Harry Crosby's story, for example, in a way that isn't detailed in Don Miller's book.
Yeah, right. Well, that, like I said, the book Masters of the Air is very different than the book Band of Brothers, because the book Band of Brothers literally follows Dick Winters for the whole book. If you read Masters of the Air, there's only 40 to 50 pages that are specific about the 100th Bomber Group. And that was not enough to make a series. And yet it has to be true, right? So how do we figure out what, so that was my first job, was to figure out, well, okay, what did these guys do at this point in the war that's not in Don's book? What were they really doing, and doing that. So that was one of the big differences between this and both the Pacific and Band. So obviously Band was based on one book. The Pacific was based on 3 memoir autobiographies. This is based on 40 different sources.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say in terms of the script writing was your biggest challenge?
I just trying to keep it all in balance, trying to keep a cohesive story. Not just because the underlying material is so complicated to try to figure out a cohesive story, but then trying to make it and having all these other things come up trying to keep it a cohesive story. Everybody's got new ideas and, well, what about this? Why don't we try this? So, some of those 400 drafts of scripts were exploring characters that never made it in the show, because they weren't part of the inherent story.
Do you have, is there such a thing as a assistant script writer? I mean, I know you had.
I think so. I think in television, I come from movies, and in the movie world, there's a screenwriter, and you sit in your office and you type and you have meetings with the director, and that's how you do it. And that's sort of how we did Band of Brothers. And it's sort of how we did Masters of the Air. In TV, they tend to have like a big writer's room. And if you're the head writer, there's 4 other writers that are like writing early versions of the scene. And maybe you have an assistant who's aspires to be a writer, and they're answering your phones, and, they take notes during meetings. And I've never worked that way. I work just by myself and don't have an assistant. I just,
How you
yeah.
keep that all in your head is pretty amazing.
Well, we have 300 speaking. Well, that's a funny story. If I meet you in person, I will forget your name in 2 seconds, and it will be very awkward. And my wife remembers everybody's names, and I like to make, I don't know if it's an excuse or not, but in Masters of the Air, there's 287 speaking roles, of which probably 250 are real people, of which I know who all of them are.
Wow.
Right. So like, I know what town, Crookshank came from. I know, I know these guys, those guys, I remember their names, and I know their names, and I know where I mean, sometimes I have to reference it, obviously, but that is, I think I have a unique skill in that regard. I like projects with a lot of characters and a lot of folk.
One of my favorite authors, historians, is David McCullough, Pittsburgh.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I never got the chance to work with him, although Playtone has a couple of times.
Heard him speak several times here in Pittsburgh. Anytime he was in Pittsburgh, I would try to go listen to him. And he would talk occasionally, he'd write these books that he took 10 years to research, John Adams or whatever.
Yep.
And how he almost got to the point he was living their lives.
Yeah.
Even his
Oh.
wife would say, "Hey, are you David today or John Adams? You know, today."
Yeah. No,
Yes, sometimes.
it's intense. My wife calls me the method writer because I get really emotionally attached to my characters, especially when they're real life people. I tend to really care.
Carolyn Miller, you asked an excellent question because that's something that I did notice also in the series. Your father is not identified by name. He's called the Brass, I think, or a
Right,
Brass,
yes.
right? Until the very end. Could you pose your question?
Yeah, I actually learned from Sam Hazeldine, who played
Yeah.
my dad, and has been
Well,
in
he
touch
had
with several of our family members, that my dad was in the last 3 episodes, but he was only identified by name until the very last scene. And I'm wondering, was that deliberate, or
Of
was it
course
just a
not.
matter of
No,
cutting
no.
scenes?
He was a much larger character in earlier, sorry, my cat. He was a much larger character in earlier drafts of the script. And I think we even shot scenes that just aren't in the show anymore. We shot them and they didn't make the final cut for whatever reasons. And so none of these things are intentional. It just becomes, well, he was a more important character a while ago in the process of the show, things get cut, and now he's not as important a character dramatically, and when somebody's name is used is hard for us to track. I don't know if that helps or
No,
explains
that's
it.
fine. I just was surprised because I had a hard time identifying. I knew he was in those last 3 episodes, but I didn't know for sure who he was.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah. Again, the POW stuff is something that I wish we could have spent more time in and explore a little deeper. And again, you can't believe actually how deep there were drafts of scripts. Like I got into the semaphore thing and how they would communicate between compounds. And I had the first draft, we're historically accurate, where I'll forget who's in which compound, but Clevin is in is in center compound, I think, and Egan is in west compound, I think, at first. And which your father was west compound? No.
well, he was moved. He was there longer than any of the other
No, I
Americans,
know.
except
So he
those who
started in
moved
center
with him.
compound then,
Uh,
right? But
oh,
anyway, my point is like we went into all of that at a certain point, you know, and all of that had to be cut out, you know. Um, and so much of the POW stuff just got truncated and shortened. And then like in episode 9, sorry, my glasses are hurting a little bit. In episode 9, the whole surrender of Mooseburg was significantly more complicated, and we shot it. We shot going to the whole peace thing and the white flag that happened ahead of the battle. I think we even shot all of that stuff. The American delegation going to meet the Germans, saying, let's make this a non-combat zone, and that was all in there at one point. Um,
I guess the other element of this, John, is when the shooting is all done, and it's, as I say, in the can, right? In the old days, and you're done, right?
yeah.
But then it goes into this post-production.
Yeah, and it's sort of the third time a movie or a TV show is written in the sense that creative ideas, big creative ideas happen in the editing, where major characters can suddenly just not be in the show.
And as a scriptwriter, are you involved in that final?
Well, I'm also a producer on the show. And so yes, I am in the conversations and I can give my opinion, but as we said earlier, I was not the showrunner. That was, that would be a Gary Getzman. There'd be a lot of different people who would kind of come down on big decisions like that. Like cutting that piece that not, I don't want to call it piece delegation, but cutting out that whole sequence of the delegation meeting with the Germans ahead of the Battle of Moosburg. That was a big cut, and it was cut.
So we just stumbled on the best idea of the evening here.
What's that?
The what do they call it? The uncut version of Masters.
Yeah.
Like
Sadly, I don't think we'll ever see that
not possible.
because of the expense involved.
It's a great idea if it's somebody else's money.
It's prohibitive, because also you have to remember there's so many special effects in the show. So it's not just adding a scene. Well, is there anything, if it's not like on the base, everything has a special effect in it. Everything in this show has special effects, which is a whole nother cost. And it's just cost.
John, the CGI was really expensive, wasn't it? I saw his work in it. And I read somewhere like 3,500 different shots and how expensive it was.
Exactly. It's roughly,
but it was impressive.
400 shots an episode, 400 separate shots. And I guarantee you, when you watch the episode, there's a few times you go, oh, that looks like a special effect. That looks like a special effect. And I bet you there are dozens of times where you have no idea that that's a special effect.
Mm-hmm. I thought that was well done. And I saw Colin's German fighters. He was the specialist there, and you could see them, and he had the right paint colors. I remember.
Yeah.
So that was
again, everybody took it very, and then there are errors, like we know about the chin turrets. I'm happy to talk about the chin turrets. Mm-hmm. Comes to money. Again, most of the show is weighted first 6 episodes. So literally 2/3 of the show is before the G shows up, really. Mm-hmm. So we only have 3 episodes then that could have the G. And how much does it cost us to now change those B-17Fs into Gs, and then to do that to the special effects too, right? Well, it was a lot of money. And again, we're coming to the end of the show, and we have to make tough choices. And one of the really tough choices was we just can't do the G, we just can't. There is a point where, and I know there's some, I don't know P-51s as well. And I know there's some complaints about not having the exact right P-51, or I don't know. I'm just thrilled that we had P-40s. Like, we at least went to the trouble of having them in P-40s in their first sequence, and then move to P-51s. Tell me what other shows would do that, so yeah.
The authenticity is unbelievable, right? I mean, yeah. Let me ask you, at the end, Todd, something?
Yeah, I just know Pam Whitelock is on, and she's going to be a guest in the future and in the coming weeks, I think. And she has a wonderful question. Pam, if you would like to ask it.
Yes, I'm sorry, I don't have a camera working at this moment, and I also wanted to say how impressed I was. It was a powerful series. My uncle was the only American that wasn't recovered from Stalag Luft 3. So,
oh wow, I'm sorry.
Meaning to that, we found he was recovered. That's part of our incredible journey that we had. So after 70 years, we did find him home. But my question is a selfish one. My granddaughter is a high school junior at Interlochen Center for the Arts, and her dream is she's studying to become a director. What advice would you give to an aspiring movie director?
Wow. Well, that is a loaded question, only because it's really complicated. Where does she go to school?
It's in Michigan Interlochen Center for the Arts.
Well, she is, these are some of the hardest jobs there are. And not I mean, they're hard actually doing them, but they're also hard to get there, to achieve, right? It's like, how do you become a director?
Exactly. Yeah.
There is no one road. There is no one way. It's changing as we speak, as Hollywood is changing at lightning speed, you know. I, 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 I'm hesitating because in some ways I don't know the answer to that question. I don't even know what I would tell an aspiring screenwriter, which I know a little bit more about, because the business has changed so significantly in the 25 years I've been doing this, and in particular in the last 5 or 6 years with the streaming companies and taking over the business and how a person started out being a director when I was coming up is not how they do it now, and I don't know how they do it now. They make little movies. It's all different. I'm kind of useless at this. I'm sorry. I don't know how I would do it. I'm sorry. I wish I could be more helpful, you know.
Justin in Dallas, I'm going to give you the last question here.
It's not so much a question. It's going back to John's comment on what they had to do with the equipment, the different planes, etc. Quite a while ago, there was a documentary called "The Shadow of the Blade," made about helicopters in Vietnam, and I got to know Hal Moore pretty well during that. Then when he came out with "We Were Soldiers," we previewed it at Arlington Cemetery, and as we were walking out, I was 2 rows behind him, and I called him. I said, "General, those were the wrong damn helicopters in that movie." He said, "Captain, where the hell do you think I was going to get A and B models in this day and age?"
Yeah.
And so it happens.
Right. And I can only say for our show, and I hope Marilyn would back me up on this. We tried. Like we always acted in good faith. Like we were always trying to get it right. You know what I mean? Like we didn't, but it wasn't because we weren't trying our hardest, if that makes sense. And there are just logistical realities of the universe.
Well, it makes perfect sense. I've been in a B-25. I've been in a 17. I'm too damn big to get in the damn airplane.
Yeah.
And, try walking down in the bomb bay between those 2 pillars at 6'3" at 250 pounds. You need to grease yourself to get through.
Yeah. Those things were tiny inside. They look real big outside, and then you get in them and you go, man, this ain't so big after all, is it?
I will say though, watching it with a nice bourbon really helped the special effects come across well.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear it. I'll keep that in mind.
Anyway.
I think we need to bring this to an end, Todd, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think I'm getting hungry. It's dinner time.
Well, John, we can't thank you enough for coming on the program and sharing all these stories, for the effort you've done. I tell you what I love about this program. I mean, to some extent, you're sort of preaching to the choir on this show. These are all veterans and sons and daughters of veterans and people that follow, the military and history in general. But, I know lots of people now that have seen the show, and I know there's going to be millions more that will see the show years from now when it gets on, Netflix and all these other things like Band of Brothers, that never knew what a B-17 was, never knew the sacrifices made by these men. And I just love the idea that the whole trilogy, including Masters, is going to live on for a long, long time.
Well, thank you. Me too. And that's really why I wanted to be part of Masters after being part of Band, because I sort of felt like Tom and Steven and the people at Apple that the world had never really seen this kind of combat accurately portrayed in cinema. As I love 12 O'Clock High, but it's not really about combat. It's about an emotional experience more. And I love Memphis Belle, but it's not the most accurate thing in the world. And its portrayal of aerial combat is particularly not maybe as accurate as it could be. And again, our show, warts and all, and I take its imperfections, but I would argue that we show aerial combat, or specifically daylight bombing combat, better than anything that's ever been made, and I'll stand by that.
I would agree to that.
I agree. As a military historian and author, I agree with you totally.
And that's the thing I'm most proud of. That's the thing we wanted to do, was tell people this happened. This is what these young guys went through. That's what the show's about.
Exactly. It was.
That was the most important thing of that show, was conveying to an audience that this stuff happened. And I'm still amazed how many people just know nothing about how awful it was up there, you know? And, you know, Lucky has said, you know, one of his biggest complaints about the show, and I think he's not inaccurate, is that we don't convey the cold enough, you know? But I think that just illuminates the fact of nobody knows what these guys went through. And now they know a lot closer, you know, how really tough it was for these boys and young men.
One of the things I remember Lucky saying, I think a couple of years ago when we first interviewed him, was the smell of these airplanes.
Yeah.
Someday, maybe after we're all gone, there'll be that technology, which would be fascinating as well.
Well, guys, I really have enjoyed this, because it's really fun to talk and interact with people who, forgive my language, know their shit. And that kind of made it really fun. So thank you for the really interesting questions and sharing your thoughts. So
thank you, John Orloff.
I'd like to say thanks for giving me a job. I mean, you know.
I'm glad I could help.
All the best. Thanks to everybody.
Thanks, John Orloff. Thank you, Glenn Flickinger. And thanks to all of you. I hope to see you Monday night for our Veterans Breakfast Club Jeopardy. Take care. Have a good